Good morning, lovely youth and students, and happy Monday! Welcome back to another week of Grace's Daily Thoughts. And I hope you had a really good weekend. Did you have a barbecue? That's what I want to know. Did you have a garden party? Yesterday, I know it rained on and off, but it was quite a nice day for a garden party. Now, I don't think there's anything I need to tell you before I begin. So let's pray. Holy Spirit, come. As we start this week, would you come and fill our hearts and minds with your presence, our houses, the places that we work. Father, overflow in those places. Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for the gift of wisdom. I pray that you would pour out your gift on all of us today, that we may be wise and discern how to live well in your world. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Cracking. Right, grab your Bibles. We are in Proverbs chapter 13. And we're going to do the second half of 13 today and finish that one off. So we're reading from verse 12 to 25. And it goes a little bit like this. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. Whoever scorns instruction will pay for it, but whoever respects the command is rewarded. The teaching of the wise is a foundation of life, turning a person from the snares of death. Good judgment wins favour, but the way of the unfaithful leads to their destruction. All who are prudent act with knowledge, but fools expose their folly. A wicked messenger falls into trouble, but a trustworthy envoy brings healing. Whoever disregards discipline comes to poverty and shame, but whoever heeds correction is honoured. A longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul, but fools detest turning from evil. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Trouble pursues the sinner, but the righteous are rewarded with good things. A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for their righteousness. But a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. There we go. An unploughed field produces food for the poor, but injustice sweeps it away. Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. The righteous eat to their heart's content, but the stomach of the wicked goes hungry. Interesting. Just at the end, there was one of those famous verses, whoever spares the child, the rod hates them. But we're not going to look at that one today, but that's quite a famous proverb that people have used over the years. We're going to look today at verse 12 and verse 19. Let me read them again for us. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is the tree of life. A longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul, but fools detest turning from evil. They're the verses that jumped out at me. I think they speak to me at the moment, but I felt God saying he sees what our hearts long for, And sometimes what our hearts long for are things that God has put there. I think there's a culture within the church, in the church history and the world, that says you have to deny the desires of your heart, and so there's been rebellion against that, saying no, you should be able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. If you want to do it, because it's your decision. And you can understand why that backlash has come, because there's been some very stringent movements in the church where they've said that you just can't have anything that your heart desires is evil, basically. And so it's an interesting breadth of history that we're walking into in these verses, and I don't know all of it. I don't assert to know any of it, really. I know a vague understanding. But what I want to come at these verses is that God sees the longings of our hearts, and He made our hearts. So, and sometimes those longings can be of God. Sometimes they're not, and it's that's what we're looking at is how do we decipher what's what, and how do we move forward with God. And the reason that these guys are in Proverbs is that we need wisdom. I think this is the wonderful but tricky part of the Proverbs sayings, is that they do stand alone, but it's not necessarily wise to take them just as they are out of the context of the whole book. So that's why we did a lot of work on chapters 1 to 9, because they set up the book. They set up that everything has to come back to wisdom. So these sayings all assume that you know that. There's the assumption that you're going to return to the foundations of wisdom that you know. That to be wise wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord, to stand in awe and reverence of the Lord. And so we have to come back to God and who God is and what God has said. And so that reminds us to look at the rest of the Bible, that this is not isolated from the whole story that God is telling. And this reminded me of what I taught yesterday in our renewed charged vision. If you haven't seen that video, you can see it elsewhere on Instagram or Facebook. It's called Vision #1. We're commanded to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind. That's the first and greatest commandment, and that we find that in Deuteronomy, and we find Jesus saying that again in Matthew. And so God must be first in our heart, and all else follows that. So if we are aligning our heart around God, and God knows us better than ourselves, the longings of our heart, we need to present them to God and ask Him to guide us in them, to give us wisdom and insight. That's why we need wisdom, buckets of wisdom, because as we'll see, sometimes it's hard to assess a situation we're in when our heart is invested in it. And I'm going to share an example about that. So let's look at how we see this in verse 12 and verse 19. So verse 12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life." And when I first read that, I was like, well, then hope can't, we should never defer hope. Absolutely not, because it makes the heart sick. And, if the longing is fulfilled, then it's like the tree of life. It's good stuff. And this, when I read the commentary about it, it brought a really good perspective on it. The hope deferred doesn't mean like withholding or the promise is going to change at all. It literally means that a long drawing out. And it talks about the slow maturing of God. And hope deferred, making the heart sick. So if we're hoping for something, if we're wanting a desire of our heart to be fulfilled, and it's taking its time, that does make the heart sick. And what do we do when that happens? Because when that longing is fulfilled, it is the tree of life. And this is assuming this is something that is of God. This is a desire of God. And I think hope deferred makes the heart sick. Just reminds us, doesn't it? When we're waiting, when something's not happened instantly, when that longing in us has not been fulfilled yesterday, like I said last week, we live in this instant gratification society now. What do we do with that heart sickness? What does it do to us? Does it turn us towards resentment, anger, disappointment, hatred? If there is a God, surely you'd let me have this. Why wouldn't you're meant to be a good God? Surely I should have this. But those sort of emotions, which are valid, very valid to have, it's what we do with them. They don't quite sit in the truth that we know about God, do we? So like I've said, God knows us better than we know ourselves. So if he's making us wait for something, if he's allowing time before it comes, there's got to be a bigger plan, right? There's got to be. It's either that it's never going to happen, potentially, and it's not right for us, and that's something that we have to ask God to help us be okay with. Because he knows us better than ourselves, and it might be actually that thing will harm us more than it will help us. He knows us. He knows us intrinsically. He knows how the world is made up. And it's really reminded me of Abraham and Sarah, or Abraham and Sarai, before they God changed their names. They longed for a child. Till they were in their 80s and 90s, they longed for a baby. And God knew that he was going to give them a child, and he'd promised that years before. Your children will be as numerous as the grains of sand, as if you could count the stars in the sky. That's how your family will be, generation of generation, your children's children. So he promised that they would have a child. And in their longing, in their desperation for this very good gift that God had promised, they doubted, they lost faith, and decided to have a child by other means, via one of Sarai's servants. And she did have a child, Haggai, and Hagar, sorry. Haggai's the prophet. Hagar, get those two mixed up all the time. And that wasn't right. That wasn't the way that God had intended it, because the child was to be of Sarah and Abraham. And God, he does bless Hagar, and he blesses, he protects their child, Ishmael. Is Ishmael? This is where I question my knowledge. And Abraham and Sarah they repent and turn back to God, and they put their trust back in him, and know that he will provide them a son. And they do. They have Isaac. And so it's what you do in the waiting. It's not easy. I promise you that. That slow maturing of God, that experience was not wasted with Abraham and Sarah. Like, that only grew their trust, and they only grew their faith and their resilience to keeping with God in all situations after they made that mistake, their error. So it's not to say that we won't make mistakes, that we won't follow the desires of our heart before time. There's nothing that God can't redeem, but it's recognizing when we're in a position of waiting, when we're in that situation, and what do we do with that time. And verse 19 helps us dig into this a little bit more. It says in verse 19, "A longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul, but fools detest turning from evil." Again, it's a good thing when a longing or desire of our heart is fulfilled. And this verse, again, there is an assumption that the first line, "a longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul," is something of value, is something of God. It's a good longing, because it's juxtaposed with the second line, "but fools detest turning from evil," that they're not so good desires of the heart, that they chase after all the time, as we've seen throughout the whole Proverbs. What it is warning against, "a longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul." We know it's really good. It's really, really good when we get something that we've been longing for. It's saying, step back from the situation and you'll see that when you set your heart on something, you lose your power to assess the situation goes down. I don't know if you know that. It's like something in life that we recognise, but we don't necessarily talk about. But when someone is in love, or they're completely focused on getting what they want, they can lose all perspective, because it can become all-consuming about that one thing that they desire. And so we haven't necessarily got that stepping back, wise perspective on the situation, which is again why we need to bring all of these things to God. Because if we're running around making decisions off this very narrow vision that we have, because our heart is set on that thing, we won't necessarily make the wisest choices. I'm sure there are many cases to argue otherwise, but there's many cases to argue for that. And that's why this proverb is there. It's saying, we need wisdom in these situations, because it is amazing when a longing is fulfilled, but it needs to be in the proper time, when God says, because he knows us better than we know ourselves. And so this really reminds me, I've got many, many examples that I could give for this sort of situation: work, life, friendship, even when to get food. Simple ones, big ones. I wanted to give you a fairly big example, which I think is sort of one of the bigger things in life that we talk about marriage. I know it's cliche, we're talking about the heart. Maybe I should have chosen a work example. I've got certain people that know me know that I have work examples of this, where there's been something that my heart has longed for, and having to offer that to God and wait on his timing. I don't know about you and how you've grown up, or what culture says to young people right now. I know some of it, I'm learning about it, but there was this kind of I'm going to use a big word here, are you ready for this? Unequivocal, what a good word, sense that, you grew up, you did school, you went to university, you met your husband, and you got married. And then you have kids, you'd work, and you die. And that's what life is. There was never this question of you wouldn't get married, even though you knew that people don't It was kind of this, that's a rite of passage. That's just part of life. You will get married. And I'm here to debunk that notion. Not to say that you'll never get married, but what I've learned over the last 6 years is that marriage is not a given. Marriage is a gift. And there's actually a passage in the Bible that says, it talks about marriage after the resurrection, that actually there won't be any marriage after the resurrection when the new heavens and new earth come. So marriage is a gift for now. Marriage is I don't know if I've got a better word for it yet, but like it's a tool, it's a mechanism, it's something that God uses on this earth for us to learn more about our relationship with Him, to reflect His love for us. We reflect it in our love for one another, and that's in marriage, that's in friendships, that's in parental relationships. It's in all relationships, and marriage is one of them. When I arrived at university, I came with this very, very strong notion that I would get married, and a very, 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 very large longing to get married. All the teen fiction I'd read growing up, the romance novels, the films, it's just like, I want a big white wedding, I want a very handsome husband and many, many children. And one of the best things I was told when I first arrived, and I was chatting this through with a friend, she said, do you know who you are in God? I was like, I think so. Maybe not. And she was like, take this 3 years to find out who you are. Because if you don't know who you are in God, how are you going to be in a relationship with someone else and in a relationship with God, and trying to figure all of that out? Figuring out who you are, figuring out who you are with God, figuring out who you are with this other person, what you are together. That's a lot. Marriage is not just this whimsical, very, they're married. It's not a fairy tale, unfortunately. It's a gift, and it's something that you work at. And that was the best advice I could have ever got. And it was then a process of de-idolizing. Is that a word? De-idolizing marriage, bringing marriage back down to its proper level, where it's still a longing in my heart, and I think that is something that God has placed in my heart. But I got to the point where I said to God, here you go. If I'm never to get married, that is okay with me. I know I'll find it hard, but I trust you. I trust your plans for my life, and that you know me better than I know myself. I know that this is a very deeply rooted longing in my heart, but I willingly offer it to you. If this is not what's going to be good for me, show me the way. Show me how to live. And that moment, and every moment, every time I have to do it again, where I'm like, oh, okay, sorry, yep, I took that back. I started to dream again. It's so freeing. It's so, so freeing. And the person that I've become in the waiting, me back then to me now, oh my days. Oh my days. That's all I can say. Like, the way that He has grown me and changed me, and the more I understand about myself, is just bonkers. It is ridiculous. And so that's just an example of that slow maturing. And there was many times when I can give you examples of how I was so focused on something I couldn't actually see what was going on around me. But that's for another day. So yeah, I wonder if there is something that your heart is longing for, that there's deep desires in your heart, and how does this perspective change that our hearts need to be centered around God, and aligning around what he says for our lives, and that he knows us better than ourselves. So maybe it's coming to him with this longing and going, okay, Father, I offer this to you. Would you give me wisdom? Would you give me perspective? Would you show me the way? And this is another great example as to when our community comes into play, because God speaks through us to one another and praying with another person, because sometimes just deciphering this on your own and your own in your prayer with God can be so difficult, and it's good to be prayed for, to pray together, to read the scriptures, to learn God's bigger story, and what he might be saying into your life. I promise you that you won't find a verse in the Bible that says you should do this exactly like this. I don't think you'll find one like that, but as we read the scriptures and we understand their context for who they were for then and what that might mean for now, we begin to understand God's will, God's character and nature, and that helps us to discern what it might mean for us now. I've talked for way too long, but I hope that that's been helpful, and I'll see you again tomorrow morning. God bless for now.